that are going to be paying a fee of $4 million as reparations, one might say, for the mistake that this legislature made a year ago. And I certainly would be the last one to say, I told you so. But quite frankly, there's people in this room that told you that this fish would never fly.
Further discussion? Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. President. I rise to explain my vote on this referral. I too will be supporting the referral and voting in the affirmative. It is because I think that after the Waive the Fare Plan was adopted and after many months of litigation, we can finally move to a new chapter in our budget issues in this county. We're moving to a new chapter with some positive aspects, that being, once again, instead of litigating with our governing partners in the county, we're cooperating with our governing partners, assuming they too approve the settlement plan. We are moving on terms based on the scenario that we find ourselves today that are as positive as one could expect. It allows us to pay off this responsibility over a 5-year period. Unfortunately, though, in the downside of all of this is the fact that a year ago we could have avoided the situation we're facing today. A year ago we could have avoided paying interest and legal fees of roughly $3.5 million and avoided putting off our responsibility to solve the county's budget problems today until tomorrow and placing that responsibility with future legislators and future generations. I am going to support the legislation, but I think it's important for us to learn from this experience when we move forward and assure ourselves that we allow complete vetting and an opportunity for the public, the legislature, and all stakeholders involved and impacted by our budgetary decisions to have an opportunity to really come before us and voice their concerns, their perspectives, their priorities, and their policies so that we can factor those in when we make a decision so that it's truly an informed decision and one that we can avoid mistakes that we're rectifying tonight with this vote. That being said, I congratulate the administration for doing a fine job in negotiating this and bringing the litigation to a closure on terms that I think are favorable terms for the taxpayers of this county. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
We have a roll call vote.
Just, I'm sorry, I was a little late with my hand there, Mr. President. I'm very positive about the vote that we're about to have here in this legislature regarding this piece of this legislation. There are a number of things I'm very positive about. Certainly, I'm glad that tonight we don't have to continue the discussion of why this sort of innovation in government became necessary in the first place. Those are issues that we'll certainly have to confront going forward, considering our $29 million budget and deficit that we have to solve as a legislature and collaboratively, mind you. I think that one of the other things that I am positive about is in particular the fact that the administration reached out to the members of the Ways and Means Committee that are on the other side of the aisle to bring them in the loop on this decision and to willingly answer their questions well in advance of tonight's meeting. I think that that's evidence of the new tone that Maggie Brooks promised us from her administration. I'm also very pleased about the collaborative nature in which the administration and Maggie worked with the school districts in coming to a resolution, in fact making it possible for us to come together tonight to cast this vote. There was another component of the FAIR Plan that I feel compelled to discuss that I'm also positive about as well, and that's the Medicaid swap portion. Instead of talking about a $50 million debt tonight, we are talking about a $29 million debt. That's a vote that I am not ashamed about casting, and one that I'm positive about in the sense that it's going to protect us from any runaway Medicaid spending that we've become used to from Albany. What I'm also positive about here tonight is the fact that we look to have maybe unanimous vote in favor of this. As I mentioned before, the administration reached out to educate members of the Ways and Means Committee. They took that information back to their caucus. They had their questions even addressed tonight. This is the right tone for us to be addressing this piece of legislation. The other thing that I want to mention is that tonight we had a bipartisan piece of legislation that was crafted by two other legislators in this body, Legislator LaFountain and Legislator Cruz, working collaboratively again as evidence of this new tone. I'm glad about this new tone. I'm happy about this willingness to collaborate. I promise to continue in that tone in working with my friend Legislator Bronson on the other side of the aisle. Tonight I am very happy to be supporting this piece of legislation. I will cast my vote in the affirmative. Thank you very much.
Legislator Hand.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make one final comment regarding the fail cam because Legislator Quattro did bring it up regarding the Medicaid intercept. I think I'd be remiss to mention the fact that there actually was a pre-existing state cap of Medicaid costs for this county, which is very predictable and dependable. And the only way the county actually makes out in the long run in saving Medicaid costs is if its sales tax continues to decline or doesn't increase. So I just want to caution the community in not thinking that opting in the intercept is necessarily a great thing for our future. Thanks.
Any further discussion? If not, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We got to be a little quicker.
Just by way of clarification as to what Ms. Andrews just referred to, I think that the reason we went from 50-some million to 29 million is the other components of the FAIR plan rather than the Medicaid swap, that being the MCC chargeback, which raised some $15 million, and the additional fees that we get through the Department of Motor Vehicles fees the county clerk arranges for. Those are the other components of the FAIR plan, and the Medicaid swap is arguably costs us more, although year to year, I guess that's a debatable point, but I wanted to clarify that we don't necessarily benefit from the Medicaid swap portion of the plan. Thank you.
I'm sure, Mr. President, that we will continue to have this debate well into next year. It certainly is a hot topic. Legislator O'Brien and Andrews and I will have to agree to disagree. But that notwithstanding, I promise to continue in the spirit of collaboration. Thank you very much.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Quattro.
Yes.
Mr. Bronson.
Yes.
Mr. Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Mr. Beebe.
Yes.
Mr. Cassetti.
Yes.
Mr. Colby.
Yes.
Mr. Cruz. Mr. Vignelli.
Yes.
Mr. Dobson.
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll.
Yes.
Mr. Eckel.
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
Yes.
Mr. Gamble.
No.
Mr. Gamina.
Yes.
Mr. Haney.
Yes.
Mr. Hanna.
Yes.
Mr. Hyder.
Yes.
Mrs. Cayley.
Yes.
Mr. LaFountain.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Lightfoot.
No, ma'am.
Mr. McCann.
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Tucciarello.
Yes.
Mrs. Valerio.
Yes.
Mr. Yolovich.
Yes.
Mr. President Zyra.
Yes.
It passes 26-3.
Before we break up this evening, I'd like to recognize a former legislator who's sitting in the back of the room tonight, former Majority Leader, Bill Smith.
Mr. President, I move that this honorable body stand adjourned until Tuesday, October 14th, 2008 at 6 p.m.
We're adjourned.